All right, so here we are. We have an example now of the Contrasts and Contradictions Signposts. We're going to be using the short story Thank You Ma'am by Langston Hughes. Now again, as we go through this short story, we're looking for contrasts and we're looking for contradictions. So when characters act or say something that is unexpected, that goes against who their personality is. So when you spot a contrast or a contradiction, stop and ask yourself, why is the character doing that? Or why would the character act or feel that way? That's our anchor question when we spot that contrast or contradiction signpost. So here we go. Thank You Ma'am by Langston Hughes. She was a large woman with a large purse that had everything in it but hammer and nails. It had a long strap, and she carried it slung across her shoulder. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and she was walking alone, when a boy ran up behind her and tried to snatch her purse. The strap broke with the single tug the boy gave it from behind, but the boy's weight and the weight of the purse combined caused him to lose his balance, so instead of taking off full blast as he had hoped, the boy fell on his back on the sidewalk and his legs flew up. The large woman simply turned around and kicked him right square in the blue jeans sitter. Then she reached down, picked the boy up by his shirt front, and she shook him till his teeth rattled. After that, the woman said, "Pick up my pocketbook, boy, and give it here." She still held him, but she bent down enough to permit him to stoop and pick up her purse. Then she said, "Now ain't you ashamed of yourself?" Firmly gripped by his shirt front, the boy said, "Yes'm." The woman said, "What did you want to do it for?" The boy said, "I didn't aim to." She said, "You a lie." By that time, two or three people passed, stopped, turned to look, and some stood watching. "If I turn you loose, will you run?" asked the woman. "Yes'm," said the boy. "Then I won't turn you loose," said the woman. She did not release him. "I'm very sorry, lady. I'm sorry," whispered the boy. "Mm-hmm. And your face is dirty. I got a great mind to wash your face for you. Ain't you got nobody home to tell you to wash your face?" "No'm," said the boy. "Then it will get washed this evening," said the large woman, starting up the street, dragging the frightened boy behind her. So at this point, these are some of my thoughts. I'm going to stop here because as I'm reading, I'm alert for contrasts and contradictions. And when I spot one, I want to pause and ask myself, why would the character act or feel this way? So at this point in the story, I'm surprised that the woman does what she does. I mean, if someone tried to steal something of mine and I caught him, I don't think my first impulse would be to take him home and wash his face. She's acting in a way that contrasts with what I would expect. So I'm going to ask myself, why? I'm going to ask myself, why would the character act this way? Now, I'd expect her to haul him off to the police station, but she does the opposite. I mean, she's taking him home to clean him up. Why would she do that? I kind of have to say I'm not sure. I mean, perhaps she knows this boy's mother, so she thinks she should take care of him. I mean, I just don't know enough about her at this point, so I'm going to keep on reading. He looked as if he were 14 or 15, frail and willow wild, in tennis shoes and blue jeans. The woman said, "You ought to be my son. I would teach you right from wrong. Least I can do right now is to wash your face. Are you hungry?" "No," said the being dragged boy. "I just want you to turn me loose." "Was I bothering you when I turned that corner?" asked the woman. "No." "But you put yourself in contact with me," said the woman. "If you think that the contact is not going to last a while, you got another thing coming. When I get through with you, sir, you are going to remember Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones." Sweat popped out of the boy's face and he began to struggle. Mrs. Jones stopped, jerked him around in front of her, put a half Nelson around his neck, and continued to drag him up the street. When she got to her door, she dragged the boy inside, down a hall, and into a large kitchenette, furnished room at the rear of the house. She switched on the light and left the door open. The boy could hear other roomers laughing and talking in the large house. Some of their doors were open too, so he knew he and the woman were not alone. The woman still had him by the neck in the middle of her room. She said, "What's your name?" "Roger," answered the boy. "Well then, Roger, you go to that sink and wash your face," said the woman, whereupon she turned him loose at last. Roger looked at the door, looked at the woman, looked at the door, and went to the sink. So I'm going to stop here again because, again, I've noticed a character acting in a way that just surprised me. When authors show us a character doing something that contradicts what we would expect, we need to stop and consider what's happening, what's going on. The author is using this contrast and contradiction signpost to tell us something. So earlier, the boy, Roger, he wanted to escape. But now, when she let go of him and he could run, he chooses to do what she told him to do. So what's that question we need to ask ourselves when we see a contrast or contradiction? Yeah, it's the why did the character act or feel this way? That's the anchor question with this signpost. So take a moment right now yourself to pause this video and ask yourself, why did Roger stay and not run away? So, okay, hopefully you came up with some thoughts. You came up with an answer about why Roger would stay. So at this point, let's keep reading. But this time, as I read, when you notice something that looks like a contrast or contradiction, something that surprises you, well, then just make a mental note about it. If you actually had the text, I would want you to write like CC for contrast and contradiction next to it. But this time, just make note of it. Notice and note it. So let's continue. "Let the water run till it gets warm," she said. "Here's a clean towel." "You going to take me to jail?" asked the boy, bending over the sink. "Not with that face. I would not take you nowhere," said the woman. "Here I am trying to get home to cook me a bite to eat, and you snatch my pocketbook. Maybe you ain't been to your supper either, late as it be. Have you?" "There's nobody home at my house," said the boy. "Then we'll eat," said the woman. "I believe you're hungry, or been hungry, to try to snatch my pocketbook." "I wanted a pair of blue suede shoes," said the boy. "Well, you didn't have to snatch my pocketbook to get some suede shoes," said Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. "You could have asked me." "Ma'am?" The water dripping from his face, the boy looked at her. There was a long pause, a very long pause. After he dried his face, and not knowing what else to do, dried it again, the boy turned around, wondering what next. The door was open. He could make a dash for it down the hall. He could run, 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 run. The woman was sitting on the daybed. After a while she said, "I were young once, and I wanted things I could not get." There was a long pause. The boy's mouth opened. Then he frowned, but not knowing he frowned. The woman said, "Mm-hmm. You thought I was going to say but, didn't you? You thought I was going to say, but I didn't snatch people's pocketbooks." "Well, I wasn't going to say that." Pause. Silence. "I have done things too, which I would not tell you, son, neither tell God, if he didn't already know. So you sit down while I fix us something to eat. You might run that comb through your hair so you'll look presentable." So, okay, this is, for me, an important place to stop because I've noticed several contrasts and contradictions at this point, and I hope you did too. So take a look at those places in the text where you made mental notes, and take a moment to do your own thinking about the places that you noticed and noted. Pause the video here for each place you noted a contrast or contradiction. Think about Roger or Mrs. Jones and what each has just said or what each has just done, and answer the anchor question, why would the character act or feel that way? So now remember, as we continue, we're looking for places where a character does or says something that isn't what we expect. That's a contrast or a contradiction. When we find those places, we want to stop and ask ourselves, why would the character act or feel this way? By answering this one question, you're going to be able to make good inferences about what the character is thinking. So as we keep reading, we'll discover which inferences might be supported and which ones turn out to be not accurate. So let's keep reading. Again, as I read, when you find parts you think are contrasts or contradictions, go ahead and make note of them. you'll want to come back to them. In another corner of the room, behind a screen, was a gas plate and an icebox. Mrs. Jones got up and went behind the screen. The woman did not watch the boy to see if he was going to run now, nor did she watch her purse, which she left behind her on the daybed. But the boy took care to sit on the far side of the room, where he thought she could easily see him out of the corner of her eye if she wanted to. He did not trust the woman not to trust him, and he did not want to be mistrusted now. "Do you need somebody to go to the store?" asked the boy. "Maybe to get some milk or something?" For me, that was a contrast and contradiction. "Don't believe I do," said the woman. "Unless you just want sweet milk yourself. I was going to make cocoa out of this canned milk I got here." She heated some lima beans and ham she had in the icebox, made the cocoa, and set the table. The woman did not ask the boy anything about where he lived, or his folks, or anything else that would embarrass him. Instead, as they ate, she told him about her job in a hotel beauty shop that stayed open late, what the work was like, and how all kinds of women came in and out, blondes, redheads, and Spanish. Then she cut him half of her 10-cent cake. "Eat some more, son," she said. When they were finished eating, she got up and said, "Now here, take this $10 and buy yourself some blue suede shoes. And the next time, do not make the mistake of latching onto my pocketbook nor nobody else's, because shoes come by devilish like will burn your feet. I got to go get my rest now, but I wish you would behave yourself, son, from here on in." Contrast and contradiction, right? Why would a character act or feel this way? She led him down the hall to the front door and opened it. "Good night. Behave yourself," she said, looking out into the street. The boy wanted to say something else other than "Thank you, ma'am," to Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones, but he couldn't do so. So as he turned at the barren stoop and looked back at the large woman in the door, he barely managed to say "Thank you" before she shut the door, and he never saw her again. Okay, so here we are at the very end of the story, and my head is completely full of thoughts based on how it ended. So the first thing I want you to do is look back at the portion we just read and find the contrast or contradiction that you thought was the most interesting. So once you've identified it, what's the question? What's that anchor question you're going to ask yourself? Yep, it's why did the character act or feel this way? So take a few moments to do this, to think about what you thought was the most interesting contrast or contradiction, and then ask yourself, why did the character act or feel this way? For me, it was at the very end when Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones actually gives him money, even though he had tried to steal from her earlier. So I'm going to ask, why did she act this way? And the inferences that I come up with are going to tell me more about her character and maybe about the theme, the big picture message that the author Langston Hughes wanted me to think about as a reader. So let's review what we did to help make those inferences about the characters. First, we learned one text clue that authors give us. The name we're going to use for this clue, the name we're going to use for this signpost is Contrasts and Contradictions. So when I see a character acting in a way that I wouldn't expect, when I want to stop right there, and I'm going to ask one question. Why would the character act or feel this way? When I can answer that question, then I'm learning more about the story and more about the character. So be prepared to build on this tomorrow as we look at a different text, as we look out for more contrasts and contradictions. See if you can't spot these contrasts or contradictions in your life or in other media you consume, whether it's watching YouTube videos or watching a movie or a show or something like that. And when you spot those contrasts and contradictions, ask yourself, why would the character act or feel this way? Thank you very much for watching this example, and I'll see you later when we talk about another signpost.